Hello, welcome everybody. This is the Live at Epiphan show. It's Thursday, 3 o'clock. We're always here on YouTube. We always talk about live video production, and today is we're going to be revisiting a topic, one of our most popular topics. I'm George.
I'm also George.
You're also George. And I can't remember, George, were we the ones who did the original version of this topic?
I believe we were. We're back with another George and George show talking about the same thing. And like you mentioned, this was one of our most popular episodes from a couple of years ago now. And a lot of people view it. A lot of people comment on it, which is great. We really appreciate that. And I think it's a really interesting topic. So we wanted to revisit it.
Yeah, it's really fundamental to all kinds of video production, not just live video production. Getting multi-cameras into a feed. And there's a lot of different ways to do it. We've tried it a zillion different ways. You and I are both in our homes right now, so there's not a whole lot of multicam I'm doing. I know you've got a little something up your sleeve you're going to share later. This is some of the criticism we got the first time around. Said, you doofuses are doing a show around multi-camera production, and you've got a single camera.
And that's true.
So,
we were only using
it's still true.
Camera. Yeah. I mean, we're going to try and demonstrate it. And part of this is that, in general, multi-camera doesn't fit everybody's style or everybody's content type. For us, and this kind of comes to one of the other comments that we had here from T. Blair saying, get to it already. This show is about trying to be as helpful and as instructional and educational as possible with these things, and not necessarily a how-to all the time, although we try to do that as best we can. So sometimes it is a little more theoretical and talking about things. And honestly, in our studio setup, in the office where we shot that old episode, and also in our homes, we don't really have a need for multi-camera unless there's a particular piece of content that really needs it. And so we might do an overhead shot or something like that. Of course, space is limited in our home studio setups, and so sometimes we just can't. So we do it if it's necessary, and you need to decide for yourselves whether or not multi-camera is important to you, and that's going to be really entirely based on the content. It can definitely help your content. It can dress up your content, make it more interesting, more dynamic. Obviously, if you're shooting something like live sports or anything along that line, you definitely want multiple cameras just to get different angles and show things in more detail. So there's various reasons to, I guess, consider this and way to look at it. But I guess some of those other comments we saw there needs major updating. Well, we're going to try to do that for you. But honestly, technology hasn't changed that much in the past couple of years to really change how we might recommend doing this. And then someone else mentioned that it was too complicated for 2020. So we're going to try and break it down. That last one, we focused very heavily on real cameras. So we're going to start, I guess, talking about the most basic level, absolute most basic level of a multicam setup. And that's probably using two or more webcams, I suppose, into your computer and running everything in streaming software. And
how many cameras can I connect in this setup? Can I do 6 cameras in this if I had 6 crappy webcams like you could buy during Amazon Prime yesterday?
I mean, theoretically you could. It would really depend on the computer. Webcams actually take a fair amount of processing power. So, and not all webcams are created equal. So it kind of depends on the host computer. Whenever we're using a computer for live streaming, and I guess we'll touch on this a little later, but whenever we're using a computer and streaming software for running a live stream, it really depends on how powerful that computer is. I saw a laptop on Prime deals yesterday that was like $200, but then I looked at the specs and I was like, I mean, my phone's more powerful than that thing, so what would be the point? That's an example of a laptop you would not want to use, honestly, for live streaming at all. And you certainly wouldn't want to run multiple cameras on it. So you do have to look at what the hardware is and whether or not it can take it. Again, your best results from plugging multiples of anything into a computer is, USB, which is how all these devices connect. It has bandwidth limitations at some point. And so trying to spread them out and make sure that they're not tripping over each other or fighting for that bandwidth is often important. So I personally, most people buy laptops these days, unless it's maybe a gaming computer. And in laptops, you usually don't have many USB ports, period, let alone ones that are on separate USB controllers. And, if you're interested about USB controllers, we did an episode about that stuff quite a while back that a lot of people found really helpful about USB bandwidth and controllers and all that kind of stuff. But the same kind of rules apply here, where if you can have, one camera per controller, that's going to be your best case scenario to make sure they're not tripping over each other. So 2 is pretty common. Long story short, 2 is pretty common. You may be able to do more depending on the computer that you're using. But of course, keeping them all straight can sometimes be a challenge, because webcams often, if you buy 3 of the same webcam model, their names will basically all be the same because they present as the same name.
Oh, they just show up as webcam.
Yeah, Logitech C920, world's most popular webcam. If you plug 3 of those in, they're all going to be called Logitech C920.
Yeah, but that's okay. You'll have some kind of visual indicator of your shot that hopefully you're using for switching. You're not switching based on names unless you're some real pro.
Hopefully, that can
wide shot, close up,
Right, and that's where your software choice might come into play. If you're using software to do this on a computer like OBS or whatever, you can configure those scenes to name those scenes and make all that a little more logical for your organization skills.
So I'm gonna jump ahead to the future comment we're gonna get with people saying, "Yeah, webcams suck."
They do.
Why would I want to do this? Just tell me something where I can use like nice enough, decent cameras, which is also me, because I don't like webcams very much because I like nice image quality and stuff. So what's the level up here, George? Give me more. I want to use nice cameras.
Yeah, so nice cameras are definitely the ideal thing to do. Webcams are not great for a lot of physical spaces, a lot of variable lighting. They're great if you're sitting directly, laptop length from your camera. That's about what they're designed
for. They're
convenient,
convenient,
and they're inexpensive. So when you're just starting out, they're not necessarily a bad way to do it. But if you want to shoot larger spaces, you want to shoot weird lighting, you want to shoot action, you want to throw it on a tripod or a wall mount or all these other things, that's where you might want to get in. Yeah, you want to look good, yes. You might want to start looking at a more serious camera, something in the, maybe not a literal DSLR, because mirrored DSLRs are not always a great choice, but something in that style. So a mirrorless camera, a PTZ camera, even a camcorder. There's tons of options there. We even have a blog post on a bunch of cameras we recommend, and we update that periodically. But those type of cameras typically will give you an HDMI or maybe even an SDI output. Essentially a really high quality camera giving you a high quality video signal. But we can't just run HDMI directly into our laptop. Computers don't have HDMI inputs. So we have to use a capture card along the way to convert it so that we basically turn it into webcam-like behavior through a capture card. Now, of course, here at Epiphan, we do make our AVIO line of capture cards with various inputs, depending on what you need, that do exactly that. And again, you need to be conscious of what your computer might be capable of in terms of how many you can plug in. But again, 2 is not uncommon, and on a desktop you might be able to do 3 or 4, I've seen in some cases.
I like this setup. We've done this setup on occasion using capture cards and OBS, and from a setup point of view, it's very straightforward because capture cards make cameras operate like webcams. Right. So from a production point of view, it's going to feel no different from using webcams. Just a little tiny bit more setup adding those capture cards. The real challenge is trying to operate your switching from your OBS or whatever tool you're using to do that switching, and hopefully you have somebody else involved who can help actually do that switching for you, because it's tricky to have to look down at a screen and do switching and then back to your production and look relaxed and cool and all of it. So
Yeah. So one of the things to keep in mind, especially with capture cards, much like webcams, is that not all capture cards are created equal. And some of them do compression on the card, and some of them don't. Your highest quality choice is going to be ones that are uncompressed. Not to brag, but that includes Epiphan's products. They are uncompressed, which means you're going to get a much, much higher quality signal to start with, even though, yes, you're going to be compressing it for your live stream, but you're going to start with a higher quality signal. There's typically less color manipulation happening there, which will really elevate the image quality overall. Some of the really, I mean, you can go on Amazon right now and you could find absolutely dirt cheap capture cards, no name
triple
brand.
dirt cheap.
Oh, but honestly, they're garbage. They do compression on the card. Their color representation is horrible. They don't often do what they claim to do in the specs. So again, you need to be cautious about which capture cards you're selecting when you go this way. And if you're selecting the absolute lowest end of the market, you're maybe not actually getting the best usage of your good quality camera, and you might just use a webcam. So, if you're going to use a high quality camera, use it with a high quality capture card to really get the most out of it. But again, we're still looking at bringing in these signals into a computer, running streaming software like an OBS or a Wirecast or a vMix or whatever you want to use, and sending our stream out from there, which I think, as you were mentioning, George, does make it harder to do a single person operation, because running that software is not always super easy by yourself. The UIs aren't really designed for that. You can stumble through it, and there's tools out there to help you, but
any of the production, anytime you have to do your own production, like whether it's adjusting your own camera, if you're in a single camera setup, if you're responsible for that camera, it's much harder to be on camera and do any kind of production. So we usually encourage, like, if you're going to be a host, just be the host, and then you can relax and be in your space and get people to help you on the production side.
Yeah.
It's a luxury, of course, we have, because we have different people who can help in our productions, but switching is no different.
So one way that you can kind of streamline this, same concept, high quality cameras, capture cards, computer software, but one of the ways, especially if you need more than 2 high quality cameras, you might be better off and find it more efficient to use some sort of video switcher, an HDMI switcher, an SDI switcher, in between your camera sources and your capture card. This way you only need a single capture card. This makes it lighter weight for the computer, can definitely make it easier for you to manage and control it. And there are switchers out there that will go from 2 to 3 to 4 to 8 to 10 to 16 inputs, depending on what you need. And they'll range from very basic, inexpensive. One of the most popular comments in our old video of this was a model that you could get on Amazon for very cheap from a Rave Sun something switcher, which comes and goes on Amazon. Not our fault. Sorry if you can't buy it right now, but it comes and goes. That one's very inexpensive. It's like $50 or something like that for a 4 HDMI switcher. So
but it's dangerous. Looking for those cheap ones, I remember it was dangerous because there was a million of them on Amazon, and they're called an HDMI switcher, where you have 1 input and you have 4 outputs and you can toggle between them.
Yes.
But I remember when we tested them, a lot of them would have like a bzzz between every time you did a switch. It was like your camera went crazy. And so I don't know, George, is there a tip for people who just to be able to find those ones that actually do, I think you call it like a clean cut or something like that?
Yeah, you really need a clean switch. Now that can be a clean cut, or it might be a much fancier switcher that has actual transitions. Depends on, again, what your budget is. But the main thing is that those really, really basic, like $20 HDMI switches, they're not designed for production, and so you will get frame tearing or signal dropouts temporarily, which means you might get a second or so of no signal picture in your stream. You don't want that. So typically the best tip that I have is look for something that also carries the feature of being a scaler, because that way it typically means the output from your switcher is going to be a constant signal and won't have those ugly interruptions, frame tearing, and all that kind of stuff. the seamless stuff, is pretty important. Someone was just commenting in chat here, the Rave Sun was seamless, but the buttons were super noisy. Yeah, they were like clunk, clunk kind of things. And you don't necessarily want that as part of your production either. So again, you got to look at what's good for you. If it's near a microphone, you probably don't want something loud. And if you're running it yourself. So yeah, you definitely want to look at that.
There's another hiccup with this setup too, in that, like, if you want to apply any kinds of graphics or other cool things to your broadcast, you have to do them. In this case, if I'm going to do stuff in my streaming software to my program, I have to add it to every single layout. Whereas if I'm using multiple cameras, I can adjust cameras individually and stuff like that in my streaming software. So
or you're trying to
HDMI switcher allows you to do, like, get some kind of roll-in switcher or something that might give you those color and effects and stuff over those individual feeds coming in.
No, absolutely. Or you're trying to manage it in two places. You're switching on the switcher and then you're doing your graphics in the streaming software, and that starts to get cumbersome and complicated unless you have a team of people doing the production with you to kind of help out along the way. So, I mean, this is probably the upper middle, I would say. Webcams being the low end option, couple of capture cards with cameras being the middle option. This is going slightly above the middle. Again, that probably depends on how much you want to budget for that switcher. But this can be a great way to streamline things a little bit, make things a little bit lighter weight on the computer, but still a very similar, familiar workflow for a lot of people. For
sure. Yeah, this would be really common.
So, and I suspect based on some of the comments here that people were expecting this one to come up. The other way to look at things is to do everything on a standalone device. So you could do this with something like the Pearl Mini, completely standalone device that's going to do your mixing, switching, streaming, recording, all right there, and be able to do those basic controls from the front touchscreen. We could bring in on a Pearl Mini, a couple of cameras and maybe even a presentation share, or maybe up to 3 cameras on a Pearl Mini from HDMI and SDI based sources, and be able to, again, create these custom layouts for our mixing and our switching and send the streams out. To me, this helps really streamline the single person production aspect, where you might have something where it's all set up for the touchscreen, so you can do your switching and your start stop there. So it kind of depends on what it is that you need, but a dedicated standalone piece of hardware can really help streamline the workflow and make it easier for you to get your own confidence monitoring. Of course, you don't have to worry about the power of a computer anymore. That's taken out of the equation. You don't have to worry about the software. OBS can be complicated. vMix and Wirecast have a cost to them. So, there might be huge advantages to just using a dedicated standalone piece of hardware like a Pearl.
Yeah.
In some cases, again, being able to multitask on one device is something that hardware often can grant you that computers struggle to do. But also stream types as well. A lot of streaming software isn't designed to send out multiple stream types at the same time, where something like a Pearl Mini, provided you have enough bandwidth, could do that. So those are things to look at as well. And again, part of that can just be maybe streaming to multiple CDNs like YouTube and Facebook and Twitch all at the same time, like we're doing right now from a Pearl. So those are things to consider. If you want to kind of step up from there, for those who haven't seen, I do have a slide here on the back of the Pearl Mini. I guess one thing we haven't touched on here is audio, and this is probably a good time to throw that in there. We were talking about cameras, but another advantage that something like Pearl Mini has is those professional audio inputs. For a computer, you would need an additional audio interface to bring in professional audio inputs. So again, there's more baked into a dedicated device, needless to say. So one of the things we often get questioned on, and this was from that previous video as well, is things like, it's possible to have 4 cameras. What about 5 cameras? One of them uses 3 to 5 cameras. So these were great, great things. And this is where you might want to step into something a bit bigger. And when we're talking about bigger, that's where we might be talking about Pearl 2. So like its little brother, the Pearl Mini, dedicated standalone piece of hardware. It's going to do all that capture, compression, mixing, switching, whatever you want, and do the stream and record. But Pearl 2 can accept up to 6 HD signals at the same time. And it has options for things like NDI, SRT, and so on. So there's a big advantage, again, to using a larger system like a Pearl 2 if you're someone who feels like you need, 3+ cameras, 4+ cameras. This might really help. And again, it has the flexibility of those other options like NDI, so you can add a lot of mixes in there if you want to. So that's probably one big way to look at it. And I'm going to look at comments here in a second. I know people were asking a bunch of things here, and I am going to look at them. I've been trying to look at them off to the side here. So if you have any questions about any of this, please throw it into chat, and we'll take a look at it. But I guess Pearl 2 would represent maybe the top end, right? So webcams at the bottom end, a couple capture cards somewhere in the middle, switcher with a capture card a little above that, Pearl Mini a little above that, and then Pearl 2 kind of at the top end in terms of use cases and quite frankly, occasionally in cost, although I have seen many examples where Pearl Mini is actually cheaper than the computer and capture card scenarios once you tally it all up. So that's also something to consider. So on the back of the Pearl 2, just to show you guys that, again, you're dealing with professional audio inputs, and you have those HDMI and SDI inputs to give you a lot of flexibility on those, plus NDI over the network as well. So great box to use for that big, wide-ranging, flexible piece. So that's pretty much going to cover what I had in slides. So let's dive into questions. I know there's a bunch of chat here, so I really want to look at that here. Let's see. One comment here: webcams are for noobs. I can't argue with that. That's definitely true. True statement. Kim was mentioning that I think commenting about you that they didn't like the way your microphone sounded. I don't know.
It's a struggle. I was saying this yesterday in a webinar. Like every week we have to get new, rebuild our studio. It seems like, and I'm still having audio issues here. So I'd love to know more about that, Kim. Where exactly? Maybe it's just not loud enough. That could be the issue.
Danny was commenting, HDMI cameras are great until the battery dies. That's true. And so what you can do there is be careful about the cameras you select and make sure that they can run without a battery. So even if you're looking at smaller, compact, mirrorless style cameras, make sure you select ones that have the option to use a dummy battery or take power directly so that you can just run the camera, without a battery at all. That's what I do. We mentioned earlier that I was going to have a little bit of a trick. This took about 30 seconds to set up, so don't hold your criticisms. But I am using a Pearl to switch, and I did set up a second camera here that I can just kind of show you guys as a side shot. I didn't key this one because obviously there's some actual background and my green screen here, but I am using a Pearl to do this with, and so this is now a multicam in our multicam episode. No more complaints about that. But some of the things to look there is the two cameras I'm using. One is a Sony a5100, which is my main camera here that I'm on now. This is what I use all the time, and I have a dummy battery for it. And so the battery never dies. It's plugged in all the time. Basically, the way I have it set up, as soon as I turn on my computer, it powers on with it and is ready to go as I left it. The G7 also has a dummy battery, which means it's kind of running down into a plug in the wall, but I have a dummy battery for that one as well, so it'll run indefinitely as well. So those are two choices. if you want to ask me which one I prefer better, it's the Sony, no question. But there's lots of options like that. A lot of my colleagues, George, I think you're using a Canon M200 if memory serves, right?
That's right. Yeah, and it's been great. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, so that's another example of and that one I believe doesn't need a dummy battery. It just powers. You can buy an accessory power supply that basically is just a USB-C power cord and runs it indefinitely.
Well, it actually still has a dummy battery, but
okay.
It's pretty seamless. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, there's some good options. Oh yeah, I guess I'm thinking of the Canon G7, not the Panasonic G7, but the Canon G7 Mark III is another good camera. It uses a USB-C. I had that for a little while playing with it, and it was a great camera. Just its a price is a bit high for what it is. But anyway, that's not this episode. Let me see. A few people saying hi. Got to some of those comments. Kim was asking if either of us are using a Pearl right now, Pearl Mini, and then corrected to Pearl Nano. And we did answer that in chat. We are both using Pearls, but neither one of us are using Pearl Nanos, as those are not physically in our hands yet, sadly. I can't.
Oh, I actually have one upstairs in my front hallway.
Quiet.
But they're not really. We haven't really started bringing them into our productions yet.
Yeah,
so you'll start seeing those trickle into our productions.
Yeah, they're pre-production samples at the moment, so they're not.
They're still pretty fresh.
Yeah. I can't wait until I have one. But yeah, still waiting for that. Let's see. Someone was commenting they love their Mini. Awesome. Glad to see it. Here's an interesting question, and I'll be honest, in our pre-production meeting, I knew this one was going to come up. How do you compare the Pearl 2 or Pearl Mini to the ATEM Mini? Well, first of all, which ATEM Mini? There are 3 models of the ATEM Mini, and the basic one, the cheapest one, cannot be compared to a Pearl at all because it is not a hardware encoder. It is just a capture card with a switcher built into it. The ATEM Mini Pro and the ATEM Mini ISO do have some live streaming capabilities. The biggest difference for me is that the ATEMs are less flexible. They don't do multi-encoding. They're limited in the types of streams they can send out, where Pearls are not so at all. They can send out multiple streams. They can encode multiple channels. They can send out all kinds of different stream types. The ATEM Mini is pretty cool for an entry-level product, but I wouldn't put it in the professional class myself, personally. So if you want a professional device, I would kind of look above that. They're plastic, not metal. And so on and so on. They're also not a truly standalone device. Without the companion software to go with them, they're pretty limited. Anonymous was mentioning maybe using a mobile phone as a camera source over something like SRT. Yes, absolutely. That's another advantage of using something like Pearl Mini and Pearl 2 is that they can take SRT inputs, which means you could stream, as we've done very recently, to limited success depending on the network connectivity, but you could stream from something else like a phone over SRT and bring it into your workflow. So that's another big advantage of looking at dedicated hardware like Pearls that have that. Let's see. Cameron's responding to Danny about an A6300 with a dummy battery. So the same setup, same dummy battery actually as the 5100 I use. They're awesome. And just saying Sony and Canon or Cameron, who's doing other things, is just commenting there that Canon and Sony glass is the way to go. And I agree. Just a note on that, the M200 and the A5100 and the A6300, those are all APS-C sensors. So for the camera nerds out there, APS-C sensors, much better than Micro Four Thirds, which is what the Panasonic G7 is. So, but that's all the comments. So I hope that covers it for people. To kind of summarize, you can definitely start out with multiple webcams, assuming your computer can handle it, and that might take some experimentation. Costs of webcams have for good webcams, has gone up fairly dramatically. So you may find yourself not far away from looking at the capture card and much higher quality cameras to really increase the level of production. But then you might want to choose whether that's multiple capture cards or a switcher and a capture card or something along those lines. And then if you're looking at kind of that truly professional piece, that's where looking at dedicated appliances like Pearl Mini, Pearl 2 are really going to shine, give you a way more flexible option in terms of stream types, in and out, and things like that, and simplicity. So, yeah. So a couple other questions coming in. Yeah, so just saying, Danny was just saying he uses an A10 Mini but still loves his Pearl Mini, and it's kind of useful as a switcher, but I agree. And if that's the case, buy the basic one if that's all you're going to use it for. And there are tons of switchers that compete directly against that in the same price category, or you can go to the much higher end roll-in stuff if you want to for switchers. And then Kim saying, what app do you use? I'm guessing this is the webcam or the mobile phone SRT stuff, Kim. So the apps that we've experimented with is Haivision, who invented SRT, has their own called Haivision Play. And then we've also been playing with the Rivet app, which is the episode we did couple of weeks ago. That's the one we were highlighting there. So there's a bunch of SRT apps for mobile devices starting to come out now. So you can check those out. Based on my experience, for me, I actually like the Haivision one, but it is way more complicated to use. The Rivet app is simpler to use, but I couldn't say which one is honestly better. But because I'm familiar with this stuff, the Haivision one, I wasn't confused by it. It made sense to me. And there's some anonymous calming lyrics works well as also. So there's a ton of SRT apps coming out there. One of the things, Kim, there you were commenting, if you want to use an iPhone as a camera but using a cable, not the best way to use an iPhone camera, I'll be honest. Last time I checked, it was difficult to get a clean output from an iPhone with a cable, and you have to get one of the Apple Lightning to HDMI adapters, which is fine. They work. Not cheap, but they work. So if you want to do it with a cable, you get an Apple Lightning to HDMI adapter and use that. I'm not an iPhone user, but the last time I experimented with it, I was always getting the on-screen stuff because it's essentially a clone of the output unless there's different apps for that. But maybe you know that, George, since you're an iPhone user.
Well, I learned early on trying to get video or data in and out of iPhones, it's just not pleasant. They make it difficult, so I don't bother.
Yeah,
you're right. There's probably ways to do it with dongles and stuff like that, but I usually end up getting frustrated when I try that.
Yeah, and let's be honest. I mean, the iPhone 12 launch was the other day. The only ones with a really high quality camera are like $1,200. My Sony A50-100 was $500. To me, it's a better value proposition to just buy a mirrorless camera and not have to worry about any of that stuff.
It's nice for your second camera though. It'd be nice to be able to take advantage of that, even for these
Absolutely.
broadcasts. I thought about it yesterday when we were talking about multi-camera. I was like, I got a phone here with this great camera.
Yeah, I'll admit I thought about
can't
it.
Get access to it.
I thought about it, but I was actually just going to use SRT and the Haivision app to run it into my Pearl and just add it in that way. I didn't end up doing it because I don't have a selfie stick or a tripod for my phone.
Same here. That's what I ran into as well.
I'm not one of those people who has that kind of thing, so I didn't have anywhere to put it. But if you do and you want to use it, it's absolutely a valid use case if that's what you have. And, you got to use what you got. So, comment here. Redneck just saying, can you talk more about Pearl Nano, please? Unfortunately, I can't. I don't have a whole lot to say today on Pearl Nano. If you missed our launch a couple of weeks ago, please go back and check out that video. That's honestly the most information that I have. We don't really have much else to share at the moment. That kind of launch video we did has as much detail as there is to share, but of course it's on the website with as much detail as there currently is. If I had one to show you to kind of dig through it myself, I would, but I don't.
We'll be back here, I'm going to guess in a month or something like that.
Yeah, we'll definitely have a lot
some
more.
Kind of like long demos where we dig into every feature, so stay tuned.
For anyone who hasn't checked out our webinars, here's a great segue to plug the webinars. If you haven't checked out our webinars, you definitely should. Some of the ones that I've done have been like 2-hour long walkthrough how-to things on Pearl Mini and Pearl 2. Inevitably, we're going to do one of those on Pearl Nano once it's available to do so. So stay tuned for that. You can sign up for those webinars on our website, epiphan.com/webinars. There's a button up at the top of the page as well. You can check out the schedule of what's coming next and also see the back catalog of everything that happened for the past 7 months. So, check that out. And of course, we're here every week live at Epiphan talking about various different things. And next week's episode, I think will be really interesting for people because this is a question that I get all the time. And that is, we're going to explore Microsoft Teams. We've talked about Zoom a fair bit here because that's what we use at Epiphan. But Teams has really kind of stepped up the game a lot. And so we're going to dive into that. And we're going to look at how you can use some of the features that Teams has built in to integrate it with your video production systems. So join us next week for that. Also, we just released our second edition of the Epiphan magazine of Evolution. I don't know.
Evolution, Dave. It's just the word evolution.
I know. I'm just messing with how you graphic people play with things. But that's available on the website, so check that out. There's a bunch of cool articles in there. It's really great stories. We look at the industry. We look at different use cases. We share some success stories. There's a few little pieces in there about Epiphan staff if you're curious about who we are. So check that out. You can get it digitally on the website. So really, I'd love for you to check that out. I think that's probably all for today.
We're done.
We're done.
See everybody
of course,
in a week.
The like, follow, subscribe, those socially things to keep up with what's going on, especially for everyone asking about Pearl Nano. Make sure to follow along and we'll have all the updates for you when they're available. So that's it for now. Thanks, everyone.